Well, hello, and welcome to the Fisher Poetry Podcast, a showcase of prose, poetry, and song written and performed by those in the commercial fishing community, mostly. I'm your host, Brad. Thanks for joining us today. For today's podcast, we're going to hear from Pat Dixon, a fisher poet out of Olympia, Washington. Welcome, Pat.
Hi, how are you?
We're doing great today.
Good.
So Pat here is one of the what I would call one of the seminal Fisher poets, and he's been with the Fisher poets for I think from the very beginning. Is that right, Pat?
I actually came to the second Fisher Poet gathering. I was brought down here by a good friend of mine, and I missed the very first one, but I've made almost every one since.
Well, I think we can excuse you for that one.
Okay.
Well, we have Pat here on today to talk about his book that he has that's coming out on Amazon here shortly. The title of it is "Waiting to Deliver." Thank you,
There it is.
Pat.
Yeah.
And it's a memoir, I would say, right, of your
Yes.
experiences of over 20 years of fishing. So why
Yes.
don't you give us a little bit of a description about the book?
Well, basically, it describes not every event and certainly not every story I have about the 20 years that I fished Cook Inlet, but I traveled up to Alaska for the very first time in 1975 and just happened to be fortunate enough to move into a cabin across the lake from a commercial fisherman and his wife, and his son was also a commercial fisherman. And 2 years later, I got hired as an end of the year kind of a replacement deckhand, and I did a apparently fair enough job that the son recommended me to the dad, and so I ended up deckhanding for 2 more years, and then bought my own boat and permit, and so the stories that I went through as a beginner, I knew next to nothing. Even after 2 years of deckhanding, there was a lot I didn't know, and so heading out onto the waters of Cook Inlet trying to catch fish was a big challenge. And I was fortunate enough to meet some people along the way who helped me and taught me how to do it, and that really made a huge difference in my career as a fisherman. And by the end, I was fairly good at it, and so this is kind of a coming of age story mixed in with a lot of craziness and a lot of stupid decisions. So we'll leave it at that.
Well, that was one of the things that I thought of when I first started reading the book, as you're describing the just before you headed to Alaska. You were a teacher in Kentucky, is that right?
I was in
Yeah,
Louisville. Yeah,
yeah. But you're originally from Indiana,
I
right?
am. Yeah.
And so tell me a little bit about how a kid from Indiana decided that going to Alaska was going to be the thing that you needed to do. I mean, what was the impetus that drove you to do that?
I've always blamed my father for it, not in a bad way, but in a good way. When I was a young teenager, along with my two brothers who were 8 and 10 years older than I was, once we hit about 12 or 13 years old, he started taking us up to Canada and into the backwoods of Ontario, and we had to either go in by train and then portage with through creeks to a lake where there were cabins built by a good friend of his, and either that or we had to fly in. And most of the time we took the train or something like that. But I fell in love with the wilderness. I fell in love with the North Woods, and although I wasn't the most avid sport fisherman, my dad certainly was. Uh, I loved being on boats. I always have loved power boats, and um, and so I kind of blamed him for the attraction that I had about going to Alaska. And at the start of the book, I mentioned a conversation I had with a colleague who wanted to know why I was going up there, because it seemed like I was going to the moon to her. And I told her I felt like I'd been born 100 years too late. and I'd like to go someplace that was wild and someplace where um, um, it, it that it just the wilderness attracted me, and the majesty of Alaska attracted me, and that was in 1970, the spring of, or the end of the school year in 1975, and, or I'm sorry, 1974, and that year was when they were building the Alaska pipeline. So it was kind of a culmination of a lot of things. I wanted to go see what it was like, and so I took a 1966 Ford Falcon window van, and my first wife and I drove up there, and we fell in love with the place. And we couldn't find work because the place was filled with laborers, because everything was a boom town. And so we ended up leaving in October and going back, and I taught another half year in Louisville, but I applied to every school district in the state of Alaska. And a little town south of Anchorage called Kenai hired me. And so in 1975, I moved up there.
And I think that's a really good, important point to make, is that, even after you moved to Alaska and you were doing fishing, you were still teaching as well.
Yes, I was
Right.
hired as a special ed teacher, and then I ended up getting the photography teacher job part time, and I had a second major in college. I was an English major, and so I ended up teaching journalism and yearbook and English, and then the last 5 years of my career, I taught drama, which I absolutely loved. Um, and but I was always a teacher in the winter and fished in the summertime.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Well,
So
I've seen some of the photos in the book, and it seems like your students really loved you too. They really enjoyed you, although they might have put you through hell once in a while. As
they
as
certainly did, but
did.
it was always, mostly good intentioned, and
Yeah.
I was really fortunate to be able to teach photography and drama, because those are both um, electives. Those are the kinds of subjects that kids want to go to, and so
Mhm.
I rarely had a discipline problem, and so I could just talk creativity and then let them go, and it was a wonderful career. So
Oh. Well, one of the things I'm gonna ask you to do today is to do some readings out of your book.
sure.
And I'm just going to turn this over to you and just have at it. We'll see you on the backside of this. Okay.
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 I'm gonna begin at the end with a poem I wrote many years ago. Um, One of the things that Veronica and have been talking. My wife has and I have been talking a lot. She's been helping me a lot with this book. And one of the things that we've talked about is the decline of the Cook Inlet fishery, and from the time when we began in the 1980s and 90s, really was a sweet spot of fishing, and the prices ended up being high some years, and we had some tremendous runs and some amazing years. But later on in the mid 90s to late 90s, and then even more so now, a lot of those things have faded away. The cannery that I fished for closed its doors 2 years after I I quit and sold out, and the company itself ended up shuttering all its canneries. And Columbia Wards used to have the most canneries throughout Alaska, and that's no more. And so I ended up writing this kind of in honor of all the things I'd seen and experienced while fishing, and while just living on the water in the summertime. Um, it's called Mending Holes, and it's for Lee Todd, who was one of my fishing buddies. I touched the past even as it disappeared before me. I placed my hands upon the backs of hours, loaded, heavy with gear, and pushed them down an elevated boardwalk toward oblivion. I mended holes in the days with a needle and twine, swatted mosquitoes like seconds as summers sped beneath me. I painted coats of the present upon planks of history, then years later spent months of chainsaws cutting them into pieces, bulldozing them onto the beach, where I lit the match that burnt them to ashes. I even hoisted a beer in their honor. I've seen compasses lose direction, watched a fleet of seasons sink over the horizon, seen sail give way to power, wood give way to glass, species disappear under thick coats of oil, and lifestyles vanish beneath politicians' dark coats. I pulled decades of tradition onto shore, put them on barrels, and walked away, leaving them to decay. Winter storms weakened them, summer sun bleached them, and I returned years later to feel them crumble between my fingers. What my eyes have forgotten, my hands remember. Cool, wet cotton gloves, stiff, rough manila line, and the heavy chains of anchors covered in generations of mud. I lean into the cool plastic of this buoy. Like seconds into hours, it gives before resisting, and reminds me that ebbing times, with all the gear, work, and fish, are like a boat on a set in a strong tide. From on board, all we see is the set, but from anywhere else, the boat and net grow smaller as they drift into the distance. So that's mending holes. And so I'm going to switch out now and go to something a little lighter. All I have to do is find it. Well, I have had all my bookmarks in here, and apparently one of them's in the wrong place. So hang on one second.
Don't worry about any of that stuff. This is all the stuff I edit out.
Okay, great.
The final product. So, oh man,
right.
God, Pat, if you ever decide you want to do an audiobook out of this and read it, let me know, because you are such a damn good reader.
Oh, thank you. And I absolutely will want to do that.
Oh, okay.
So we should have a conversation about that.
I just feel blessed to be able to listen to listen to you. I mean, it's like I'm your private audience right now. I mean, and I don't know if you ever got a chance to listen to the podcast that I first published with you and Mo, but I mean, that was what kind of just set the hook for me, was listening to you guys doing that. So anyway, I'm just starting to tell you, I'm having a really good time listening to this.
Oh, okay. All right. So, all right, got it. I finally found it.
All right.
Okay, here we go. Okay. So this chapter is called Fishing Naked. I'm at the Vagabond, a small Alaskan pub near the cannery, housed in a log and plywood cabin a block from my house, with a single pool table, 4 sit-down tables, and a dozen bar stools. It's between fishing periods at the start of the 1985 season, and the place is full. Fishermen, cannery workers, and tender skippers and crew sit or mill about, sharing stories, booze, beer, and cigarettes. The only woman in the place is the owner behind the bar, keeping us all on a short leash. The small bar room is loud. Cheers go up over the pool table whenever someone makes a good shot. Everyone is talking over the guy next to him. I'm at the bar listening to the friend of a friend pontificate about his fishing technique. This is one of a half-dozen places fishermen frequent when letting off steam, and when the liquor and the camaraderie begin to loosen otherwise tight lips, tidbits of valuable information drop to the floor like nuggets. Last period, one of the guys in our group was off the head of the island at closure, says a flannel-clad deckhand from under his mullet. He saw jumpers, 3 and 4 in the air the whole time. And in that little rip that forms up there on the flood, he nods as he takes a gulp of Alaskan amber from his glass, eyeballing his audience. We're heading their next opener, I shit you not. We all nod back and log that into the database inside our skulls. In 2 or 3 days, those fish will be long gone. But it's good information we can check out on a slow day. Someone mentions the weather forecast. Supposed to be hot as fuck next week. That'll drive the fish down, maybe even keep them from heading to the beach. Salmon like a certain temperature of water, so there could be some merit to that. I hate picking on a hot day, I shrug. I sweat like a motherfucker in rain gear. Mullet Man chimes in. I seen my skipper pick up in hip boots. He says it's way better, cooler. You don't gotta wear bibs. The bib overall style of rain gear we wear is made of neoprene and doesn't breathe at all. On a hot day, it's like working inside your own personal sauna. I have hip boots, I say. I might give that a try. I raise my glass toward him in thanks. Like most bar advice, his idea is worth exactly what I pay for it. The forecast for the 1985 salmon season is depressing. Sockeye salmon return to the rivers 4 years after they hatch. The 1981 escapement up the Kenai was poor, so the prediction for this year is a low return, and the locals know it. As a result, 3 weeks before the season's scheduled to begin, I'm still without a crew to help me with boat work, and I'm starting to get concerned. I've promised Veronica I won't go fishing alone. Though a lot of fishermen do, we've talked it out and agree that it's too dangerous to take the risk. Still, I should have a deckhand by now. A few days later, I'm under my boat changing zincs when this short, skinny kid I've never seen before stops by for a chat. How's it going? He asks in a soft-spoken voice. Annoyed by the interruption and anticipating what he wants, I barely look up. Not bad. How you doing? Encouraged, he bounces on the balls of his feet. Good. This place is amazing. I'm Joel. My girlfriend and I just got here from California. She's working for the cannery on the slime line. He smiles behind a full beard. I'm looking for work as a deckhand. I perk up. Got any experience? He shakes his head. No, but I learned fast. Most guys want crew that know how to pick fish and tie lines. Ever been on a boat? No, but like I said, I turned back to the zinc. You'll have better luck getting the cannery to hire you. I dismiss him, conveniently forgetting my own attempts at getting hired in Haines a decade ago. I could use a deckhand, but I don't want to train to anybody. His face falls, but not into defeat. Jaw set, he looks determined. I don't want to work for the cannery. I want to work on the water. He pauses and then starts to walk on. Thanks anyway. Good luck. As he leaves, I think about how I could use someone, even a greenhorn, to help with the fish hold full of boat work that I have to do in the next 3 weeks. I remember I currently have no prospects. If you don't find anything, check back in a couple of days, I call after him. That evening, I exhaust my last remote possibility of finding a crew. No one, it seems, wants to fish for 10% of a small catch and low price. When Joel comes back around, I offer him an hourly job, helping me get the boat ready to fish, with the promise that if he works out, I might hire him for the season. During the next few weeks, I give him jobs I don't want to do, like sanding mildew growing underneath the varnish on the mahogany ceiling of the cabin, or chasing down spare fan belts, oil, and other supplies all over the cannery, getting gear from my locker in the warehouse. The cannery frowns on him sleeping with his girlfriend in the hen house, the bunkhouse for women, so I agree to let him stay on board while he's working for me. We visit as we haul the electronics, tools, and sleeping bags from my pickup truck to the boat. I learn he's a graduate student studying literature at UC Irvine. He's definitely book intelligent, but doesn't have much to offer in the way of boat sense. What he lacks in salt, though, he makes up for in hard work. He never complains, does most jobs faster than I anticipate, and goes beyond the assigned work, organizing junk drawers, putting away tools, and cleaning in his time off. Plus, though he lacks the aggressive attitude and stout build most skippers like to see in a deckhand, he's a nice guy. All things considered, I decide to hire him as a crew for the season. A week before the first period, Veronica and I take Joel and his girlfriend out for ice cream and break the news that he's got the job. They're both ecstatic. We shake hands on how long I expect him to stay until the season's over and the boat's put away. His pay, 10% of the gross, and how it will go. My mantra for hiring crew is, I can't promise you anything as far as wages. That all depends on how many fish we catch. I do promise that we'll stay safe, have fun, and catch fish, in that order. It's a line I use throughout my career, and I mean it. I'm not, or nor do I want to be a screamer on land or sea, yelling at my deckhands when they aren't fast enough or make a mistake. I want my crew and I to be a team, doing our best, enjoying each other's company, and catching as many fish as we can. I won't risk our lives for a bigger payday. Joel is glad to hear that, and we enter the summer full of optimism. The season starts slow, which is fine by me. The fewer the fish there are to catch early on, the more time I have to teach Joel how to pick. By the time he's showing promise, ADF&G, Alaska Department of Fish and Game, worried about the poor return of the Kenai, decides to limit the area we can fish. They draw a line east to west across the inlet, south of the river from Humpy Point, Cape Kasilof, to the northernmost tip of Calgon Island. We are restricted to fishing south of that line. That way the salmon north of it can make it up into the river to spawn, while the fleet's harvest will provide data to Fish and Game about how many sockeye are left in the lower inlet. On the first fishing day, after my bar conversation with Mullet Man, the weather is clear and warm. The tide is flooding, and we hear of a few fish being caught close to the line. So we set out a few miles south of it and drift north, not seeing many hits. When we get a mile from the line, I put Joel in the stern. You pick up the gear, I tell him. If there's more in the net than we've seen, I'll jump in and help. Sure enough, the first shackle has a lot more salmon than we expect, all down low in the web. I'll be damned. They've been hitting deep all along, I say. Joel looks at me over his shoulder. I'll get my gear on. Be there in a sec. As I duck into the cabin, I think, time for those hip boots. I'm actually proud I remembered they were on board. We pick almost 300 fish out of that set. Wearing nothing but the ridiculous, stupid, and ineffective hip boots, I get absolutely soaked with seawater, blood, gurry, and slime and scales. The boots keep my legs dry, but the rest of me is a disgusting mess. As soon as the last of the net is on board, I tell Joel I'm going to run south for 45 minutes or so, change clothes, and do this drift again. He's pitching fish into the hold. I'll clear the deck, and then I'm going to lie down and take a nap in the sun while we run, if that's okay. Sounds good, I say, already peeling off my soaked shirt and hanging it to dry on the cabin door, which is bungeed open. I step down into the cabin and grab my day bag from under the bunk. I peel off my clothes as I throttle up the boat and turn her south. At the same time, I pluck the microphone for our group radio from its perch and report my set's location and catch. It's the biggest report of the day for our group, and I feel proud, especially when Rob asks me to repeat my location. If good fishermen like him are interested in my information, I must be doing something right. I steer us south, weaving between boats and nets. I'm down to nothing but my socks when Wayne comes on the radio and gives his own fish report. I'm right by Pat, he says. I'm going to run south and throw it out again. I look out the door while he's talking. His boat, the Pelican, is just off my starboard stern, maybe a quarter of a mile away. Oh, I think. Perfect. I grab the mic. Hey, Wayne, can you see me? Yeah, I see you, Pat. Got your binoculars handy? Right here, what's up? Train them on my back deck. I want to show you something. Okay. I pick a course that is clear of boats and nets as far as I can see, center the wheel on that heading, and then dash out on deck to moon Wayne. I mean, why not? I'm already dressed for it. But I only have a short time to do this, as the spin of the propeller will swing the Skookum 2 off course in less than a minute. As soon as I'm on deck, I realize there's a problem. Joel is in the way, spread-eagled face up on the hatch covers, sound asleep. He doesn't move as I step out of the cabin and look for a place to stand while I aim my ass at Wayne. I quickly determine that the safest place to pull off this maneuver is pretty much right over Joel's head, right over Joel's face. But hey, he's asleep, right? Knowing Wayne is likely looking through his glasses at me right now, there's no time to waste. So I assume the stance with a chuckle of self-satisfaction and begin waving. The guys in my fishing group are my kind of people, quick-witted and irreverent. Practical jokes, trash talking, and jibes are frequent when we get together. Once they hear my deckhand for the season is a greenhorn, a college student, and a literature major, they decide he's an easy target. Mostly, they treat him well, but when they get him alone, they plant seeds of paranoia about how skippers can change at sea Oh, he might be a stand-up guy on land, but some guys, not saying Pat is anything like this at all, but some guys go nuts out there, alone with their crew on a boat, miles from anywhere, making their deckhands do all sorts of things and treating them like shit. And watch out for boat initiations. You never know what someone might pull. Joel never mentions this to me, but when the boat begins to swing while I am semaphoring my message to Wayne, causing my shadow to cross over his face and his eyes to open, I'm sure every seed they planted bore immediate fruit. I'm still bent over when I notice a blur of movement behind me. In an impressive flurry of speed and agility, Joel scrambles to his feet and makes a run for the cabin. Certainly with no way certain his skipper has gone rogue, he thinks of better of being trapped inside with no way out, and instead detours almost overboard, turning to gape at me from the other side of the cabin door, eyes wide, white knuckled fingers curled around the edge of the door, toes barely on the boat. I figure he needs an explanation, but I'm oblivious to what he must have seen when his eyes opened from his nap. I offer up my best rationale and point to the Pelican. Wayne's right over there. What I fail to remember is that Joel and I have known each other a little less than a month, and we've been fishing together for less than 2 weeks. He has no idea who Wayne is. I can almost see smoke curling from his ears as he stares at me in fear. By now, the boat is well off course and accelerating into a sweeping turn. I have to get into the cabin fast. I make a dash for the door, running directly toward Joel and scaring him with the quickness of my move. He jumps backward, hands still holding the door, body almost going horizontal over the water. I watch him land back on board as I rush down the steps and grab the wheel, getting us on course again. I look back to see him still frozen in place, peeking at me from behind the door to see what his psycho skipper might do next. Suddenly, it hits me what his reality has been since he was so rudely awakened from his nap, and what he must be thinking. I turn forward again, wave my arms in the air, and shout, "Nude fishing!" Okay, I wanted to read one called Alone on the Fish. This was excerpted and published in National Fisherman just about a week, 10 days ago. This is called Alone on the Fish. It's 4 p.m. on a windy, choppy day. Near the southern end of the fleet, Danny and I have been in the fish all day, picking, laying back out, picking some more. We find ourselves all alone as we move west west of the fleet in a building sea, trying to avoid a large, scattered kelp rip. I'm already thinking this will be the last set of the day. Danny is tired after picking over 900 fish, a good day by anyone's standards, and today better than most. The radio reports are few, and the boats that aren't already heading to the river aren't catching much. I see a speck on the horizon northeast of me a couple of miles, but she's the only vessel in sight. We reach water clear of the sticks and kelp to set to the west. I see a bunch hit the net in a flurry of foam as we set, but it's quickly lost among all the whitecaps. We lay out the gear while running in the trough, and on the bridge I'm hanging on to the wheel as the boat rolls left and right underneath me. It's hard enough to keep track of my direction with the compass, let alone look back at the net while setting. Danny has his head down, helping the gear peel off the net in the wind with his hands, keeping a close eye on the blowing web so he can pull the brake on the reel if it hangs up or on a cork or a snag. Neither of us can really tell if we're getting any fish or not. We finally get the net out and head into the cabin. The wind is brisk and cold, with spits of needle-like raindrops mixed in, but the small diesel stove has the cabin warm and dry. Danny asks if I mind if he takes a nap until we pick up. I nod, put on my sock cap and army jacket over my rain gear, and put on a pair of gloves, and head topside to watch the net. Even after 5 years of fishing, I still get queasy in the cabin on a rocky day, so I figure I stand a better chance of staying on the grounds and finishing out the period if I'm in the fresh air. I go out on deck and put the boat in reverse so I can get some slack on the tow line. I pull it around to the port side and tie it off on the midship cleat so that I can tow with our bow going into the 4 to 5 foot waves. Another trick Dean has shown me how to do. I climb the ladder to the bridge and swivel the seat to face the stern, bracing myself with my legs. I hang on to the side of the bridge with one hand and steer the boat with the other. I tow the net, trying to keep the gear from flagging out or stretching in the direction of the wind and current. The fish run with the waves, and if the net flags, it won't catch much. I watch the gear as it stretches off to the east into a gray, angry, white-capped stampede of waves. I can only see the first third of the net clearly. Tiny in the distance, I can barely make out our orange buoy at the end of the net, bobbing every now and then. I light up the smoke with a good deal of twisting and turning against the wind to shield the ladder, suck on it, and watch. I see splashes halfway down the first shackle. Good-sized bunch there. A few seconds pass. Another right behind the boat, and another kicking up foam toward the other end of the gear. The bunches light up for just a second, then stop. The fish we're catching can't fight long because of the tension created by the waves and the boat stretching the gear as we tow. So I'm pretty sure I'm not seeing at least as many hits as I am seeing. This is getting good, and after a particularly large hit, I let out a whoop and scramble back down the ladder to make a fish call. I key the microphone on the sideband. Yeah, I'm getting quite a few hits here in the last few minutes in case anyone is interested. I look out the window at the gear while I'm talking, and a bunch slams into the net about 50 corks out. I love when that happens while I'm on the radio, because then I get to say, yeah, there's another good one right now. Don on the Marauder answers, "What are your numbers, Pat?" I tell him my latitude and longitude, and he pauses a second before replying, "Do you see a boat a couple of miles north and east of you? Are you off west by yourself?" "Yep," I answer, "that's me. Is that you up there?" All I can see is a gray dot near the horizon in the direction of the river. "Yeah," he says, "we're clearing out some kelp that hit our gear in the last set. I had to roll it on just to get out of there, and moved west. We're already setting out again. It's 4:30. I don't know if I want to move now." Don, I say, "This is looking really good here, and they're charging north. Trust me, you want to move over and get in line with me. I'm getting nailed here." I feel a sense of urgency trying to convince him that this is worth the effort. The day is almost over, and I know the feeling of being tired and frustrated dealing with sticks or kelp in the gear. But I think it's rare to be out here all by ourselves on a school of fish. I see another hit and key the mic again. "Yeah, there's been a couple more since we stopped talking," I say. "And there's another one." A long pause, and then he comes on. "Okay, we'll pick up. Move over. Let me know if it dies off." "Will do." I hang up the microphone, grab some cookies and pop, plug in the external speaker, and head back topside. The tow is lifting the lines near the boat out of the water. Fish are hanging in the gear as far back as I can see. We're going to have to pick up soon, or we'll never make it before the end of the period. I look at my watch. It's just before 5. We have a little over an hour to go. I watch as dawn moves west. I figure I'll wake Danny in 5 minutes, start picking in 10. Excited, I light another cigarette. The wind whistles around me until I jump down from the bridge and swing into the cabin. "Come on, Danny," I yell. "We've loaded up again. Time to pick some more fish." As he sleepily rubs his eyes and pulls on his boots, I call Don and tell him I'm going to start picking. "How's it going up there?" I ask. "Not bad," he said. "There's definitely some fish here. We've had a couple of nice bunches already, and we just got it all out. We'll wait 10 to 15 more minutes and pick it up then." "Roger that. I'll be on the back deck." Danny and I put on our gloves and rain gear. I take off the tow, put the line back off the stern, and let the net flag. Picking while using the net as a sea anchor makes for a more stable deck, and it's impossible to get the fish out of the gear while you're towing. We bungee the door open and hurry to the stern. I estimate we have at least 300 fish in the first shackle 30 minutes later. It's 5:40. We're not going to get it all out of the water by period's end, and if we get caught by Fish and Game with the gear out, the entire catch will be confiscated. Though the odds are low of getting caught way out here by ourselves with all these fish, I don't even want to risk it. So this is the title piece of the book and where the book got its title. It's called Waiting to Deliver. On the good day, when boats return home, low in the water, holds full, nets wrapped around salmon rolled on the reel. After picking half the net and laying it back out while the fish keep hitting, then running to the other end and doing it again all day long. no time for breaks, a sandwich, or even water. Your face, beard, and glasses streaked black by gurry, dotted white with scales, back aching, fingers and wrists sore. You find energy reserves, threads of adrenaline buried deep, sustain you until you've made the run home, and toss a line to the boat you tie behind, the last of a dozen hanging off the port stern, 15 feet from a matching group tied to the starboard side of the tender, taking fish anchored in the middle of the river. This day of donkey work, this day of absolution, isn't over. Won't be for hours. At the back of the queue, you know you'll be here past dinner, past dark, maybe past dawn. You'll eat a baked potato and a red salmon garnished with lemon, onion, and butter, less than 2 hours from the time you plucked it alive from the sea. You'll wash it down with a cold beer from the cooler, watch the sunset, and think how this is the best, most complete life you can imagine. Salt air cools as shadows lengthen, and the water changes from blue to black. You trade bunk time with your deckhand and fall asleep before your head hits the pillow. The smack of a boat hook on the bow wakes you both as the next boat in line cuts you all loose to go deliver, and those of you still tethered together like a serpent in the glare of arc lights work to move up, fighting the current, pulled and yanked off course by boats fore and aft, bumping throttles forward, neutral, reverse, trying not to ram the one ahead of you, hoping the one behind you does the same. Your deckhand fends off as you swing too close to the vessel sleeping to starboard, until the lead boat tosses a line around the tender's cleat again, and you all slide back in the current like a sigh. Engine after engine goes silent. Lines creak around the cleats as they stretch taut. Your crew slips into the bunk while you settle back in the skipper's chair, light a smoke, and sip a cold cup of coffee. You're still waiting to deliver. There you go. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Pat. That was just simply wonderful.
My pleasure.
So this is Pat Dixon, a Fisher poet from Olympia, Washington, reading from his book, Waiting to Deliver, which is now available on Amazon.com. I strongly encourage you to get his book. It's a wonderful read, and just the pleasure of having you here, Pat, today just added a lot to just enhance that. Well, that's it. This one's in the tote. A video of this and other performances we recorded are on our YouTube channel. You can reach me via email at thefisherpoetrypodcast@gmail.com, on Twitter at the FPPcast, and at the Fisher Poetry Podcast page on Facebook. If you'd like to support this podcast, you can make a donation via our podcast host, Anchor. Links to all of these and to Pat's book on Amazon are provided in the podcast description. Your support and comments are important to us and greatly appreciated. The Fisher Poetry Podcast is written and produced by me, Brad Wortman. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe to haul the latest episodes into your net. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you on the next one.